Pucks with Haggs
is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 122nd episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. With me, longtime friend and colleague, Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody hello and tell them where they can find your work, my friend.
You can find me at my Rink Wrap blog, which I link to social media such as X and Facebook. And I'm in the current yearbook issue of the Hockey News with the Bruins article, among 31 other fabulous presentations.
Very good. Check that out online and on newsstands. Hockey News is a fantastic publication. We're recording this episode on 9/11, Mick. So, I just would like to give a shout out really quick in memory of Ace Bailey, Garnet Ace Bailey, two-time Stanley Cup winner for the Boston Bruins, legendary guy, gregarious guy, like a fun player that was on those Stanley Cup winning teams with Bobby Orr. I have a little bit of a connection to Ace Bailey through my dad, because my dad actually did some work for him. When my dad had a trucking company, he and Ace Bailey drove all the way up to Canada with a truck full of hockey equipment, and then drove all the way back. And it was the day after the Phil Esposito, Ray Bourque ceremony. So Ace Bailey was in rare form, needless to say, when they were driving up to Canada and back. And my dad was a huge Bruins fan at that time, in that era, the Bobby Orr era Bruins. Mm-hmm. So it was a super treat for him to be able to hang out with Ace Bailey all day. And he was telling me about how they went up to customs, and the customs agents started asking Ace Bailey all these questions about the equipment and where it was going. And Ace is got his Stanley Cup ring on, and he's adjusting it while he's talking to the customs agents and kind of showing it in their face. He had all these fun stories about Ace from those trips. So he sounded like a fantastic guy, was obviously an excellent hockey player. And it just continues to bring into focus just, remembering 9/11, the lives that we lost, the people that we lost, the tragic event it was, and that we're never going to forget any events that happened that day. We're never going to forget any of us where we were that day when it happened, and all the lives that were incredibly negatively impacted by that tragic event. So just a moment to, kind of reflect on Ace Bailey here, Mick.
People we know in our neighborhoods, big, Twin Towers, it's a lot of people, and it wound up getting close to home for a lot of people. I was on the highway going north to Wilmington for Bruins training camp when I heard on WBZ AM 1030 that there had been a plane that struck one of the skyscrapers in New York. And I'm thinking, huh? I'm thinking a Cessna or something, when a Cessna hit the Empire State Building, Yep. And I'm not even talking about King Kong. But I didn't realize the full extent of it until they said the second one hit. And this was now a terrorist attack on the United States. Got to Wilmington, watching it on the big screen, and Jerry Cheevers walks in and says Ace was on the plane. And we also know Mark Davis, Boston
Correct.
University Terrier.
Yep.
They were both working for the Los Angeles Kings and were flying out to camp. And my brother did a wonderful painting of Ace Bailey's dramatic goal late in Game 1 of the 1972 Stanley Cup Final, where he turned Brad Park and roofed it on Eddie Jockman. The Bruins had led that game 5-1. Rangers came back, and everybody's, oh, no, here we go, because they still have 1971 and Ken Dryden still firmly in their minds. And so the regular season, even though they knocked another one out of the park, didn't mean anything to the fans. Well, Ace came to the rescue that day and set the Bruins on course to win the Stanley Cup again in 72. It was him. It was an individual move by a guy who was playing fourth line with Mike Walton. The Bruins top nine was a hard nut to crack. And
Yep.
And he got in there, and late in the game, less than 3 minutes of regulation, and he did it. And the Bruins never looked back. But my brother did this painting of Ace, and I don't know why so many years went by before we finally made him aware of this painting that was at the end of my parents' hallway in East Walpole all those years. But my brother started making small prints of it, and I brought an 8x10 to Ace to have him autograph one and give him one. And he was beside himself that this had ever happened. And, it's been in the sports museum in the Garden, since then. And it was even on TV 38 when he was doing it in the early 70s, when my brother was showing it with Tom Larson between periods. But anyway, Ace, the last thing he did before he got on the plane was tell his wife, make sure you get this framed. And
really? Oh, I didn't even know. Wow, I didn't know that.
This is an incredible story that has. It just I'll remember more and more if I keep talking. So I'll stop now.
Yeah,
but yeah. So there's our family connection. Through my brother Don, who's an amazing artist. He did these scoreboards.
Yep.
But that was something he did when he was just out of high school. We brought it to a Bruins game back when you could sit on the visiting bench during the pre-games. Last game of the 72-73 regular season, the Bruins had just traded Ace Bailey to get Gary Doak back. And the Canadians came over saw us sitting there, and Don's got his painting there, and everybody starts autographing the thing. Peter Mahovlich, all the way across center ice, big signature. Bob Wilson did it. Johnny Busick signed the back of it. Jimmy Roberts, and the list goes on. Even got John Kiley's, the organist's autograph on it. So, so that's a long history of that one, and commemorating Ace. And fortunately, we were able to make contact with the family and get them some, deluxe versions of it. So in the aftermath. So, but Ace, awesome guy. Loved knowing him. Later in life, as when he was a pro scout visiting the Garden on behalf of the Kings. So it's pretty cool that the Monarchs, when they were in the American League, commemorated him as well the way they did. They really did a lot. And Barbara Pothier with the foundation, and it's just amazing the work that they did with the Bailey family in the wake of all of that, and extended his legacy and for a long time. It was really awesome.
Yeah, all of it well deserved, because he was such a well-liked person, a great hockey player, obviously, but touched a ton of lives, and was within that fabric of the hockey community that we always talk about, where everybody takes care of everybody else. And it's pretty neat that you have that personal connection, and that that painting was so meaningful to him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
I mean, even on paintings, he's wearing his trademark white turtleneck. I mean, Espo always wore a black turtleneck. Ace always wore a white turtleneck. It's a funny thing that guys would just have their little idiosyncratic things that they did back when they played. But that was his.
Very cool. So, it's great just going over some memories, and that we both had, somewhat personal connections to him. But no doubt, I mean, when you cover the Bruins for long enough, and even when you just follow hockey long enough, you begin to develop these connections that you never thought you would. And it's just one of the great parts of being part of the hockey culture. So, we'll never forget Ace Bailey. We're always going to remember him. It's, it always comes up on September 11th. It's one of the first names and people that I think about every September 11th. So we're thinking about Ace and his family again this September 11th. But let's move on to the hockey and the Boston Bruins. And things are starting to crank up now with the Bruins, Mick. First day of rookie camp. They're going to the Prospect Showcase in Buffalo on the weekend. An interesting roster. No Fabian Lysell, no Georgii Merkulov. Riley Duran's on the roster, Trevor Kuntar, John Farinacci, Frederic Brunet, Jackson Edward. So there are some guys on there that'll be interesting to watch. But it's interesting that they left them off of that rookie camp roster, perhaps. And we talked about this before the podcast started, perhaps a nod to them that they're kind of viewed now as NHL players or, NHL hopefuls, but not prospects anymore. But there's a part of me too, though, that feels like going to that prospect showcase and really going in and dominating would have been a nice start to NHL training camp for them, would have given them a little bit of a kickstart going into a camp where they're going to be competing for jobs. And if I were Fabian Lysell, or if I were Georgii Merkulov, I might have pushed to go to that camp and be a dominant player and kind of ride that momentum going into regular training camp, knowing how much is on the line and also just wanting to make a good impression. Like I feel like wanting to do more makes the better impression rather than sort of holding out of stuff or being held out of stuff.
Yeah, I guess there's a few different prisms to look at this. I can certainly see the one you're angling toward there. I'm assuming that the Bruins must have trying to send a message to both guys that, look, you've been in professionals now for 2 years. I mean, note that Brett Harrison is back in the rookie camp here.
Yeah, Ryan Mast, too. He's
right.
been around for a while.
Yeah, right. I feel like Ryan Mast is like the oldest 21-year-old I've ever seen. There's a funny couple of names in here. Drew Bavaro. Is he Mark Bavaro's kid or something?
No, he is not Mark Bavaro's kid. I think he's from Florida.
He is from Florida, but that doesn't mean Mark Bavaro's. Is he still around?
Yeah, I don't think he's. I'm like 99.9% sure he's not Mark Bavaro's kid. And I don't think Bavaro had a brother too that played in the NFL. I don't think it's his brother.
That's right.
I don't think there's any relation.
Okay, and then there's defenseman Loke Johansson, who I'm assuming is Luke, only because Luke. Is it Luke?
It's Luke.
Okay,
because he was a draft pick. He was a draft pick this past year. He was like a 6th or 7th round pick out of Sweden.
Well, I guess what goes in Finland doesn't necessarily go in Sweden, because we found out that Jonas Korpisalo is actually Jonas, even though there's 2 O's. So, and then the one other birthday I want to note here is Charlie Hilton, 6'5". He's the youngest guy in the rookie camp. He actually is 17 years old.
Yeah.
He doesn't turn 18 until the day that I turn 68. So I got exactly 50 years on this dude. So
that's crazy.
I hope he makes it so I can discuss this with him sometime. And maybe we can share a cupcake or something.
Yeah, you could share a birthday cupcake, kick around, sing each other happy birthday. Are you 1? Are you 2? Go through the whole list.
I'm only 50 years older than the youngest guy in Bruins rookie camp. I remember how the morning when Reggie Lemelin retired, because I think that was the day that there was not a single NHLer left that was older than me.
See, like I remember, or I go back to my moment like that is when Sagan was a rookie and drafted, and he was I'm old enough to be his father, basically, like biologically. Like that was the one where, like, when I saw that he was born in 1992, that was the year I graduated high school. I was like 17, 18. I was like, oh man, like that's crazy. And
by the way, this camp is one goaltender away from being the first Bruins rookie camp ever without a 1990s birthday.
I know.
Ryan Bischel, July 5th, 99.
It's crazy.
If he's not in there, everybody's a 2000 or more.
Yeah, no, starting to get old, Mick. It's
starting to get old.
No longer creeping up on us. It's there.
It's no longer about the teenage hockey anymore.
Rather than the like esoteric kind of vague sort of names, or like names that aren't that familiar that seem kind of out there. What names are you looking at that when and I believe the games are going to be streamed on the Bruins website. We're going to be able to see them.
Oh, good.
Watch all the games in their entirety. That was the word on the street today.
I was wondering that.
What players are you going to be sort of looking at, or what? Who are you curious to watch of the players that are on that list?
Kuntar. Kuntar's the one that really, because this kid, even when he was at BC, if a guy came up to him when he was like a freshman at BC and gave him any grief, he would just like grab the guy with one arm and twist him into a pretzel without moving, like he was swatting a fly. And I'm thinking, ooh, this guy might be a pro. Well, here he is, and he's about to play his age 23 hockey season. And he's from a great town to produce players, Buffalo. And I love how this kid plays. I just hope he can keep up with the NHL pace, because I feel like his foot speed zone to zone is probably the only question whether or not this kid could develop into a real bottom six kind of a pill and help an NHL club like the Bruins. He can play center. He can play wing. This kid's pretty versatile, and he's pretty nasty. I think it's just looking forward to seeing whether or not we got an NHLer here, and I think speed's the question.
Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than in 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. Right now, you can take advantage of Caitlin Clark, racking up triple-doubles and dropping dimes in every game she's playing, or hop on the Jarren Duran train as he's posting big offensive numbers in just about every statistical category imaginable. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss the deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Yeah, I mean, the reality of some of the players that we're watching here, some of the interesting players that are on the radar. Trevor Kuntar is definitely one of them. He's one of those gritty, sandpapery, net front presences. We were actually laughing during the practice today because I think a puck bounced off his shoulder or elbow and went into the net for a goal. And we're like, that's exactly how he's going to score at the NHL level. Just plopped in front and having a puck deflect off him, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, don't use them all up.
Yeah, he's definitely a Bruin-style player, and I like the way he plays. The skill level's not off the charts. The skating level's not off the charts, but I think he brings other things to the table. Could be a really interesting sort of third, fourth-line guy with a little bit of, offensive touch. I'm really going to be curious to actually watch Riley Duran because he's a guy I think that rides into this rookie camp and this training camp with a lot of momentum. And frankly, he played in the AHL last year. He's one of those guys that I guess you could argue that he could have skipped this prospect camp and this rookie camp if he really wanted to. He probably is one of those guys that could have just said no thanks and waited until an NHL camp, especially when he got name checked by Don Sweeney on July 1 as a guy that's going to be competing potentially for a roster spot at the NHL level, just based on the way he looked in Providence at the end of the year. But he's going to the prospect showcase. He's kind of the leader of that team now at rookie camp. And he could go in and really give himself a leg up on some of these other young players potentially competing for an NHL spot if he has a really good weekend. And I think it's good on him. I'm really going to be interested to see what he does, what kind of impact he can have, if he's a little bit more of a dominant player against maybe some guys that are a little bit younger than him or some of his peers.
He's a right shot. They need right shots. And the Bruins, they're not looking at the stats. They know that Providence was down last year compared to the year before. So Duran was cast in a more of a checking role, and that's probably what the Bruins are happy to see, playing in different roles and seeing his game mature in ways that it's going to need to in order for him to be useful to them in the short term, at least. I mean, he won't have to grow a game from ground floor. He's got that two-way kind of style already, and similar to Kunter, but not with as much. A little more with skill, a little less with the edge, but with sufficiency in both departments to be a good bottom six player. Yeah. That's why they're looking at him, and I think that you're right. I think that they're looking at their right wings and they're saying we have a lot of keeping an open mind about how this thing turns itself out, and they're not ruling him out for anything right now.
No, and he's a lot bigger than Kuntar too. He's a big sort of rangy forward that has ideal NHL size. Not the fastest guy in the world, but his skating is good. All of his skills, I think, are pretty good. And I think he's one of those players, frankly, that he's got a high hockey IQ. So I think part of the reason he had so much success in the AHL after jumping from Providence to the AHL was he was surrounded by smart hockey players like himself. And I think that really put him in a better environment to succeed, where everybody sort of was on the same page and the same wavelength, thinking the same way. You know, once you get to the pro level, everybody's got really good hockey IQ. So they're all sort of like, you know, doing the right things.
Even, as varying skills as they may have, they all understand their roles very, very well and what they can and cannot do in a game with big boys. And it's amazing. You can see these little things happen that reveal themselves about how guys, they have a deeper toolkit than you might realize within their role for take for instance when the Bruins got Pat Maroon. It was kind of fun watching to see the different ways that Pat Maroon's pretty good.
Yeah,
that I didn't really give a long look to when he was playing for the opposition.
Yep. No, so he's got some skill. There's no question about it. You know, he's definitely, like, skating speed wise, he is ultra slow. There's no question about it. You know, and there's really no other way to put it when you were watching him out there. And the skating part of it is rough, and that's what's going to ultimately, I think, make it harder for him to, like, hang on to a spot at the NHL level. But you could see the skill level. You could see the way he thought the game, what he did with the puck, like all those different things. He was good. You know,
the checking routes were amazing.
Yes,
and the way he could cut off and read transition plays and interrupt you'd think he was the guy who was the video coach. You know, the way he would think out there. He just did stuff that was like, wow. He mitigates his lack of speed, and then has a lot of tricks and craftiness when he gets into the contact areas. That I really got to appreciate him as a hockey player. And after that acquisition, sometimes you can see much better close up than you can from a distance sometimes.
Yeah. Another guy that'll be interesting to watch is John Farinacci. Had a decent season in Providence last year. Talking to Ryan Muginel after the rookie camp session today, kind of alluded to that the schedule and the rigors of the AHL season in pro hockey kind of made him wear down in the second half of the year. He wasn't as effective as he was in the first half, and that makes sense. He played like 20 games his last year at Harvard. So, like, you went from playing on the weekends and just playing Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, whatever, 2 games a week on the weekends, to the AHL schedule that's much heavier, and they play, 70 to 80 games.
And Providence had a terrible schedule last year. They got a ton of those 3-3s.
Yep. Looking for concert tickets for the rest of this summer, early fall. Last year, I used Game Time to get tickets to Def Leppard, Poison, Motley Crue, and Joan Jett at Fenway Park. And you can go out and get Fenway Park concert tickets this summer and this fall with Game Time. Pearl Jam's coming in September. I believe Post Malone is also coming to Fenway Park in September. So why not use Game Time to get your tickets for those concerts, in addition to the football action that you're going to have that's just starting up as well, that you can use Game Time to get Patriots tickets or any tickets to either NFL or college football all around. So it's fantastic using Game Time right now, taking the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. You can have all-in pricing, which is the feature shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, which is my favorite, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply again, but create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, it's understandable that the consistency and that the performance level wasn't quite the same in the second half as he adjusted to that schedule and sort of made the adjustments diet, conditioning wise, like all the stuff that you have to do when you're a pro, because much more is demanded of you physically. It's going to be interesting to see what he does in his second year of pro, because there were a lot of good things he did in the first half of the year when he was one of their leading scorers and he was really effective. And it'll be good to see if he can transition that into like that consistency from beginning to end this year. And, he was a guy that I think is similar to Riley Duran, who Muginel mentioned was a Monty and Chris Kelly kind of player. I think Farinacci is that same kind of player. So I would suspect that he may see some NHL time this year as well at some point. but I think he's a guy that I want to see what he does in this rookie camp, because he's another one that should probably be a dominant player at this point in his career.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about him. I kind of feel like I need to see him. I suppose I guess the last memory of him wasn't as impressive as the next one will be for the reasons you just went through. So I am looking forward to seeing, okay, this kid's going to be 24 in January.
Yep.
And so it's kind of time for him to decide what his level is going to be as a pro.
Yep.
And, especially from a skill standpoint, that's going to get determined fairly soon. He's one of those crossroads guys. And the crossroads kind of came up for him rather quickly. Some people seem like they're prospects with a 5-year window. His seems shorter to me.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
we'll
it's
see
harder,
soon,
it's harder to have that window when you started college late and then you went to college for like almost close to the full duration, and then, all of a sudden you're being released in the AHL, you're at 23, 24, 25. Like you really don't have too many years to develop before you're going to start knocking on the door. It's not going to happen.
Yep, that's true. I mean, as much as we want to, think that, look, just when we start getting sick of guys because they're not there yet and they're not the shiny new toy anymore, a lot of times they're hiding in plain sight and they're getting better and we're not looking at them anymore. Yep. And they're getting better looking all the time. So you never want to take your eyes off a guy like that. And that's the discipline that the management teams have. And that's how they have to go about their business. The forgotten prospects, the ones that, aren't getting any headlines and they're still hanging around, they're still farming up those players. And sometimes they sneak up at a later date. You just don't know when somebody's going to spike.
I think that Lauko was kind of like that. He was sort of in Providence for a couple of years and sort of weren't sure what, he was going to turn into. And then all of a sudden he turned into like a fourth line option and a guy that for a couple of years they got some good mileage out of as an energy sort of player. And then we're able to trade him for a useful part that they brought back in Lettieri. So,
and let's not forget they still got Parker Wotherspoon, who went through this with the Islanders.
Yep.
He's kind of a poster boy for this with the Islanders, behind what was a stacked D the year they went to the conference final in 21. And it's changed around a little bit. But the things that he does well in his overall game is just, there were more appealing options when it comes in physically larger packages to get so many guys, the Pulak, Pelech, there's like 3 or 4 other ones that I'm mental blocking on right now. But Wotherspoon wound up becoming an available guy, and the Bruins wound up capitalizing on having a late blooming prospect whose NHL game has been pretty good for them when needed. And now he's going to be probably going in needing to just compete to make sure he stays at 7. And it'll be the left shot option who can slide to the right. And he's probably the odds-on favorite to be the 7th D when the season opens. But that's not what he wants. So it's gonna be some competition back there.
It sure will be. And speaking of the back end, I think that's another area to look at. A couple of the players here. I think Frederic Brunet is a guy that I think, should take a step forward in the AHL this year. It'll be interesting to watch him play. He had a, developmental year last year in Providence, was very young for the AHL level. And I think it was an adjustment for him going to pro, going against bigger, stronger, faster opponents. And then Jackson Edwards, a guy I really want to watch a bit and see how he plays because he's raw, but he's got some skill. Certainly he plays with an edge physically and an attitude that I think is very Bruins-like. And that's the kind of guy I think could eventually in a year or two turn into a player on the Bruins back end and a guy that develops into an NHL player. And I kind of want to see where he's at developmentally right now, Edward, headed into his first full AHL season.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at he and Brunet are both 6'3". Edward only weighs 3 more pounds, but by all accounts, Edward is a much more physical player, even though he is half a year younger.
Well, Brunet fancies him, and he was talking about that. He kind of fancies himself an offensive defenseman, a puck-moving defenseman. But he said today, like he needs to start playing more physical and
knows.
sort of focus on that area of the game, because that's where he was maybe a little light last year.
Well, he's like Brett Harrison, but as a defenseman, he's a guy who just needs pro hockey against grown men, and then build himself up physically. Yep. And it's gonna, for some of these guys, they got the skills, they got the vision, they got the attitude, but they're string beads. And I think that he's a guy who a little like Harrison, maybe not as severe, just needs time as a pro to build up a body that can withstand the game and that level. And then let's see how far his skills take him, because those are two guys with a lot of skill.
Yeah, Edwards, I would call it what he's got, sneaky skill.
I'm sorry, I was referring to Brunet and Harrison, but
Harrison.
But I know you started this out with Edward, excuse me.
Yep.
But I like, maybe there's a left shot Kevin Miller there in the making.
Harrison to me is like, he's got a good shot. There's some things he does well. His size is very good. There's no question about that. But like, to me, like, I've seen enough of him now that he has not fully jumped out enough at me from a speed point of view, from a playmaking point of view, from a like notice me point of view when he's at these development camps. And like, he was a development camp this year, and like, that's a point where, like, when you're his age with his experience level, you should be dominant. Like, you should be very noticeable in that kind of environment, atmosphere. And like, I do notice his shot occasionally. Like, he's got a good shot. He's got a good one-timer. He's got a good, snap the wrist off real in tight spaces. Like, that part is, I'd say, the only real thing that I've noticed about him that stands out, having watched him multiple times in the last few years. So I think he's got to add some dimensions to his game if he's going to continue to, further advance and maybe get a taste of the NHL level. I just don't think he's a good enough player to get by on like offensive skill alone.
Probably only Wayne Gretzky could, make it in that body. I think that he's a kid who's got a great attitude, but I think he's got a long way to go to get himself there physically, and how long that window the Bruins can give him to make that happen as a minor leaguer. We'll see, but he does have a kind of handsy, in a way that makes you say, well, maybe this is a guy that, that we'll be hearing about in a few years, but maybe he'll never get there. Some people just can't pack it on.
Yep. No, it'll be interesting to see, like, what if he can develop further. But like, I feel like he's getting to a point where it's either now or never, like very shortly, within the next year or two. I feel like he's got to really start to bump up what he's doing, and, really sort of like raise his profile as to what he's, or go a different direction and like change the identity of who he is as a player. You know what I mean? Like, undergo like a Brian Boyle sort of transformation of being, winning faceoffs, blocking shots, doing that kind of stuff. If the offense isn't going to truly come at the pro level, he's definitely going to get, I'd say, another probably year or two to show what he can do and to really, push it further. But he's, you're going to want to see more if he's going to continue down the path of being a potential like top 6 guy. He's not doing enough yet for that.
I think if there's some incremental progress there, then they'll probably keep an eye on him. I don't think it's going to be cut bait like in a year from now. But I do think that he has to make some progress physically in order for him to have a shot at even becoming an effective American League player before we even start talking about the show.
Absolutely. All right. That is some solid NHL rookie camp, Bruins rookie camp prospect showcase talk right there. Mick, thank you very much for joining us.
See you at the rink.
Everybody else out there, thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the rink.